My name is Sarah Chen, and I need to tell you about the night my life changed forever. It was a story I thought would end with healing and hope, but sometimes miracles come wrapped in lies so beautiful that we never see the truth until it's too late. This is the story of Luna Martinez, the girl who saved my husband's soul and nearly destroyed our world. The Georgia rain was coming down in sheets that October evening when my husband David pulled into our driveway. But he wasn't alone. Through the blur of water on my kitchen window, I watched my husband of 15 years emerge from his sedan, his suit jacket draped over someone small, a teenage girl with tangled dark hair and clothes that had seen better days. I grabbed towels and met them at the front door. David's eyes held that familiar mixture of determination and compassion that had drawn me to him back in college. But there was something else there, too. A spark I hadn't seen in months. "Sarah," he said, guiding the shivering teenager inside our Marietta home. "This is Luna." The girl looked up at me with eyes the color of storm clouds, defiant despite her obvious vulnerability. "I told him I didn't need charity," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. "It's not charity," David replied gently. "It's what people do." As a family court judge, David encountered broken lives every single day, but something about this particular case had gotten under his skin. Luna Martinez claimed she'd aged out of the foster system 6 months earlier with nowhere to go. She'd been living in her beat-up Honda Civic, showering at truck stops, surviving on convenience store food and sheer stubbornness. The social worker was going to place her in a group home across town, David explained later as we prepared our guest room. "But Sarah, you should see her art. She's been sketching the courthouse, the people, everything. She has this incredible talent, and she's so smart. She just needs a chance." I watched my husband smooth the comforter with more care than he'd shown anything in our home for months. You see, since David's brother Michael was killed in Afghanistan 2 years earlier, my husband had been going through the motions of living. He still showed up to court, still came home for dinner, still kissed me goodnight, but the light in his eyes had dimmed. He'd turned down his promotion to appellate court, stopped playing his guitar, even canceled our annual trip to Savannah. But now, arranging fresh flowers on the nightstand for a teenage stranger, he seemed alive again. "How long?" I asked. "Just until she gets on her feet. Maybe finds a job, saves some money." He paused. "I know it's a lot to ask, but..." "David." I touched his arm. "Of course she can stay." That first week, Luna moved through our house like a cautious cat, always ready to bolt. She ate meals quickly, washed her dishes immediately, and spoke only when spoken to. But I caught her studying our family photos with an intensity that made my chest tight. And sometimes I'd find her sketching in the living room, her pencil capturing details I'd never noticed, the way morning light hit the piano keys, the exact curve of David's smile in our wedding portrait. She draws like she's trying to memorize everything, I told my sister Jennifer over coffee. Like she's afraid it'll disappear. "Maybe it will," Jennifer replied, stirring sugar into her cup. "Girls like that, they're used to temporary." But I was beginning to hope Luna might make an exception for us. The transformation in David was remarkable. He started coming home with art supplies, professional-grade pencils, sketch pads, even a small easel. He'd sit with Luna at the kitchen table after dinner, watching her work while I graded papers from my middle school English classes. "Tell me about this one," he'd say, pointing to a drawing of the courthouse steps. "The man in the gray suit comes every Tuesday," Luna would explain, her voice growing stronger each day. "He always brings coffee for the security guard, but he never goes inside. I think he's working up the courage for something big." David would nod thoughtfully, and I could see him filing away her observations, using them to better understand the people who appeared in his courtroom. By November, Luna had found a part-time job at the art supply store where David had been shopping. She was saving money and talking about community college, about maybe studying graphic design. She'd even started calling us by our first names instead of Mr. and Mrs. Chen. "She's good for him," I told Jennifer during our weekly sister lunch. "I haven't seen David this engaged with life since before Michael died." "And she's good for you too," Jennifer observed. "You're glowing, Sarah. Like you're remembering what it feels like to be needed in a different way." She was right. Having Luna in our home had awakened something maternal in me that our own struggles with infertility had left dormant. David and I had stopped trying for children 2 years ago. the monthly disappointments becoming too heavy to bear. But now our house felt full in a way it never had before. One evening in late November, I found Luna on the back deck, sketching the sunset over our neighborhood. The Georgia air was crisp with the promise of winter, and she'd wrapped herself in one of David's old sweaters. "Penny for your thoughts," I said, settling into the chair beside her. She smiled, a real smile, not the careful, grateful one she'd worn those first weeks. "I was thinking about how strange it is. 3 months ago, I was invisible. People looked through me, around me, never at me. But you and David, you see me." "Of course we do, honey." "No," she said, turning back to her sketch. "It's not of course. It's rare. It's miraculous." As I watched her capture the last rays of sunlight with precise, confident strokes, I couldn't help but agree. Luna Martinez had walked into our lives during one of Atlanta's famous thunderstorms, and somehow she'd brought the sunshine with her. December brought unseasonably warm weather to Atlanta, and with it, a new rhythm to our household. Luna had been with us for 2 months, and the tentative politeness of those early days had evolved into something that felt startlingly like family. She'd claimed the sunny corner of our living room as her art space, and her drawings now covered our refrigerator like a teenager's report cards. David had even had several of her courthouse sketches professionally framed, hanging them in his home office with visible pride. "Sarah, look at this," David called from his desk one Saturday morning. He was reviewing case files, but his attention kept drifting to Luna's latest piece, a haunting portrait of an elderly man she'd observed in the courthouse waiting room. "She captured something the photographs missed," he said, his voice filled with wonder. The way his hands shake just slightly, the worry in his eyes. "She sees people, really sees them." Luna beamed from her corner, where she was working on a new project. "Judge Chen taught me to look for the story behind the story," she said. "Everyone who comes to court is there because their life took an unexpected turn." It was true. David had been sharing more of his work with her, not the confidential details, but the human elements. How to read body language, how to listen for what people weren't saying. In return, Luna had been helping him see his cases through an artist's eyes, adding depth to his understanding of the people seeking justice. Their bond had grown into something beautiful and slightly mysterious, like watching two puzzle pieces discover they'd been designed for each other all along. "I have news," Luna announced over dinner that evening. She'd been working extra shifts at the art store, and her confidence had blossomed along with her bank account. "I got accepted to Georgia State's community college program. I can start taking art classes in January." David's face lit up. "Luna, that's incredible. We're so proud of you." "There's more," she continued, twirling spaghetti around her fork with elaborate care. "I've saved enough for a security deposit on a small apartment. Nothing fancy, just a studio near campus, but it's mine." The silence that followed felt loaded with unspoken emotions. I should have been happy for her. This was exactly what we'd hoped for when she first arrived. Independence, education, a future built on her own terms. But the thought of our house without Luna's presence made my chest tighten. "When would you move?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "End of January, maybe? I don't want to overstay my welcome, and you two have already done so much." "Overstay?" David interrupted. "Luna, this is your home. For as long as you want it to be." She looked between us, her storm gray eyes bright with unshed tears. "You mean that?" "We mean that," I said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "But we also want you to do what feels right for you." That night, as David and I lay in bed, he turned to me with an expression I recognized from our early dating days, nervous but determined. "I want to ask you something," he said. "And if it's too much or too soon, just say so." I waited. "What would you think about us making this official? Adopting Luna, I mean. She's 18, so it would be adult adoption, but it would make her legally part of our family. She'd have the same rights as a biological child, inheritance, medical decisions, everything." The idea took my breath away. Not because it was surprising, I'd been thinking the same thing for weeks, but because hearing it out loud made it real. "David, she's an adult. Why would she want to be adopted?" "Family," he said simply. "Security. The knowledge that she belongs somewhere, to someone. Forever." I thought about Luna's drawings scattered throughout our house, about the way she'd started saying our instead of your when talking about household things, about how she'd begun calling David Dad when she thought we weren't listening, testing the word like she was trying on new clothes. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I think that's perfect. We approached Luna the next evening. David paced the kitchen while I set out her favorite cookies, the chocolate chip ones from the bakery near her job. We have something to discuss with you, David began formally, then stopped and laughed at himself. Sorry, that sounded like court. Let me start over. Luna looked between us with amused concern. Did I break something? Use too much hot water? Forget to, we want to adopt you. I blurted out, the words hung in the air like smoke. Luna's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, confusion, hope, fear, before settling into something I couldn't read. I'm 18, she said finally. People don't adopt adults. Actually, they do, David said, his voice gentle. It's called adult adoption, and it's more common than you might think. It would make you legally our daughter. You'd be Luna Chen if you wanted. You'd have all the rights and protections that come with being family. But I already feel like family, Luna said, her voice small. Isn't that enough? It is, I assured her. But this would make it permanent. Legal. It would mean that no matter what happens, no matter where life takes you, you'd always belong to us and we'd belong to you. Luna was quiet for a long moment, studying her hands. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with tears. I've never belonged to anyone, she whispered. Not really. I've been a case number, a placement, a temporary solution. But never someone's daughter. You're our daughter now, David said firmly. The paperwork would just make it official. Can I think about it? Of course, I said. Take all the time you need. But even as I said it, I could see the answer in her eyes. She wanted this as much as we did. She just needed time to believe it was real. 3 days later, Luna found us in David's office, where he was reviewing adoption paperwork he'd quietly obtained from a colleague in family law. I have conditions, she announced. David looked up from the documents. Okay. I still want to move into that apartment. I need to know I can take care of myself, that I'm choosing to be part of this family, not just dependent on it. That makes sense, I said. And I want to keep working, keep going to school. I don't want to be a burden. You've never been a burden, Luna, David said softly. You've been a gift. She smiled then, the radiant expression that had become familiar over the past months. Then yes, I want to be your daughter. Officially, legally, forever. The adoption process took 6 weeks. Luna did move into her small studio apartment near Georgia State, but she came home for dinner 3 nights a week. And every Sunday was reserved for family time, sometimes working in the garden, sometimes visiting the High Museum of Art in Atlanta, sometimes just sitting on the back deck talking until the stars came out. The day the adoption became final, Judge Patricia Williams, David's colleague and friend, presided over the ceremony in her chambers. It was a small gathering, just the 3 of us, Jennifer and David's parents who'd driven down from North Carolina. Luna Martinez Chen, Judge Williams said, signing the final document. Welcome to your forever family. Luna had tears streaming down her face as she hugged us both. I can't believe this is real, she whispered. Believe it, David said, his own voice thick with emotion. You're stuck with us now. That evening, we celebrated at Luna's favorite restaurant, a small Italian place in Little 5 Points where the owner knew her order by heart. As we walked back to our car through the warm Atlanta night, Luna slipped her arms through ours. Thank you, she said quietly, for seeing me, for choosing me, for making me real. I squeezed her hand, marveling at how completely she'd transformed our lives. 6 months ago, David and I had been going through the motions of a marriage dulled by grief and disappointment. Now we were parents, guardians of this fierce, talented young woman who'd walked into our lives during a thunderstorm and stayed to become our miracle. As we drove home through the familiar streets of Marietta, I caught David's eye in the rearview mirror. He was smiling, really smiling for the first time since Michael's death. Luna had given us more than we'd given her. She'd given us back our ability to hope, to love, to believe in the possibility of unexpected joy. I had no way of knowing that in 3 short months, everything I thought I knew about our beautiful new daughter would crumble into dust. Spring came early to Georgia that year, bringing with it a restlessness I couldn't quite name. Luna had been officially our daughter for 3 months, and the novelty of family dinners and Sunday outings had settled into comfortable routine. She was excelling in her college classes, her artwork was improving dramatically, and David seemed more content than I'd seen him since his brother's death. So why did I feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop? It started with small things. Luna's mail, which had been forwarded to our address during the adoption process, occasionally included letters that made her face go pale. She'd always quickly explain them away, medical bills from before she had insurance, collection notices for her old car payment, but something about her explanations felt rehearsed. Then there was the phone call I accidentally overheard. I'd come home early from school on a Tuesday in April, planning to surprise Luna with takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant. Her car was in the driveway, but the house seemed empty until I heard her voice coming from the back deck, tight with tension I'd never heard before. "No, you can't just show up here," she was saying. "I told you, I have a new life now. A real family. You can't destroy that." I froze in the kitchen, torn between retreating to give her privacy and staying to make sure she was safe. "That's not fair," her voice continued, and now I could hear tears. "I was 17. I didn't have a choice. I did what I had to do to survive." The conversation continued in Spanish, too fast for my limited high school vocabulary to follow, but the emotion was universal. Fear, anger, desperation. When I heard her footsteps approaching the sliding door, I quickly busied myself unpacking the takeout containers. "Sarah." Luna's voice was bright with surprise. "I didn't know you were home." "Just got here," I said, studying her face. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her smile was firmly in place. "Everything okay?" "I heard you talking to someone." "Just a friend from my old neighborhood," she said, moving to help me with the food. "Nothing important." But her hands were shaking as she opened the cabinet for plates, and she kept glancing toward the phone she'd left on the counter, as if expecting it to ring again. That night, I mentioned the call to David as we got ready for bed. "Should we be worried?" I asked. She seemed really upset. David frowned, pulling on his pajama shirt. "Luna's past wasn't easy, Sarah. There are probably people and situations she'd rather not revisit. But she knows she can come to us if she needs help." "Does she, though?" "Really? Sometimes I feel like she's still that scared girl who showed up in the rain, afraid we'll change our minds about her." "Give her time," David said, but I caught the flicker of concern in his eyes. "She's learning how to be part of a family. That doesn't happen overnight." 2 weeks later, I found the first photograph. I was helping Luna organize her art supplies in the living room when a manila envelope fell out of her portfolio, spilling its contents across the coffee table. Most were her own sketches, but mixed among them were several old photographs, the kind with white borders that suggested they'd been printed years ago. One showed a much younger Luna, maybe 13 or 14, standing next to a teenage boy with dark hair and familiar storm gray eyes. They were both smiling, but there was something haunted about their expressions, like children playing at happiness while the adults weren't watching. "Who's this?" I asked, holding up the photo. Luna's face went white. She snatched the photograph from my hands with more force than necessary. "My brother. From before. You have a brother." I was stunned. In all our conversations about her past, Luna had never mentioned siblings. "Where is he now?" "Dead," she said flatly, shoving the photos back into the envelope. "He died when I was 16. That's how I ended up in foster care." The finality in her voice suggested the conversation was over, but questions burned in my mind. If her brother had died just 2 years ago, why did she look so much younger in the photograph? And why hadn't she ever mentioned him before? That evening, I pulled David aside while Luna was at her evening art class. "There's something we don't know about her," I said, showing him the rough sketch I'd managed to draw of what I remembered from the photograph. 2 children, standing close together, both with those distinctive gray eyes. David studied my drawing. "Sarah, lots of siblings look alike. And trauma affects people's memories. She might not be ready to talk about her brother's death. But David, she's never mentioned him. Not once. Don't you think that's strange?" "People grieve differently," he said, but I could see doubt creeping into his expression. Maybe talking about him is too painful. I wanted to let it go, to trust David's faith in Luna's explanations. But something nagging at the back of my mind wouldn't quiet. That night, I found myself staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the Luna we knew, open, grateful, eager to please, with the Luna I'd glimpsed in that phone call and in her reaction to the photograph. The next morning, while Luna was at work and David was in court, I did something I'd never thought I'd do. I Googled her. Luna Martinez, Georgia foster care, yielded nothing helpful. Neither did Luna Martinez Atlanta or Luna Martinez art student. It was as if our daughter had materialized out of thin air 6 months ago. But when I tried Luna Martinez Tampa, Florida, remembering her occasional mentions of growing up near water, I found something that made my blood run cold. A news article from the Tampa Bay Times, dated 3 years ago. Local teens sought in connection with elderly man's death. The accompanying photograph was grainy, clearly taken from security camera footage, but there was no mistaking those eyes. Luna Martinez, then listed as 15 years old, was wanted for questioning in the death of 73-year-old Robert Hartwell, who'd been found dead in his home with evidence of a struggle. The article mentioned that Luna had been seen at Hartwell's house the day before his death, along with an unidentified male companion described as her brother. Both teens had vanished before police arrived to question them, and my hands were shaking as I scrolled through follow-up articles. The case had gone cold after 2 months. Luna and her brother had never been found. 3 years later, she'd surfaced in David's courthouse, claiming to be 18 and aged out of foster care. But if the article was correct about her age, she would only be 18 now, meaning she'd been just 15 when she came to us, not 17 as she'd claimed, meaning she'd been lying about everything from the very beginning. I printed the articles with hands that felt disconnected from my body, then sat staring at the evidence scattered across my home office desk. The Luna in those photographs looked younger, harder, desperate in a way our Luna never had. But those eyes were unmistakable. The sound of the garage door opening sent panic through my system. Luna was home early from work. I shoved the articles into a folder and slid it into my desk drawer, then rushed to the kitchen to appear normal. But when Luna walked in, chattering about her day at the art store, I could barely manage appropriate responses. "Sarah?" she said finally, studying my face with those too perceptive eyes. "Are you feeling okay? You look pale." "Just tired," I managed. "Long day at school." But Luna continued to watch me with an intensity that suddenly felt less like concern and more like calculation. How many times had I seen that look in the past months and interpreted it as artistic observation? How many times had I praised her ability to really see people without realizing she might be cataloging our weaknesses, our blind spots, our capacity for forgiveness? "I think I'll take a bath," I said, needing to escape that penetrating stare. "Help yourself to whatever you want for dinner." As I headed toward the stairs, I heard Luna's voice behind me, soft but clear. "Sarah, thank you for everything. I know I don't deserve a family like this, but I'm grateful every day." The words that would have warmed my heart that morning now sent ice through my veins. Because if the articles were true, if Luna Martinez really had been connected to an elderly man's death in Tampa, then her gratitude might not be love. It might be relief at having found the perfect hiding place, and David and I, in our eagerness to heal our own wounds through helping her, might have welcomed a killer into our home. The folder sat in my desk drawer for 3 days like a live grenade, while I wrestled with what to do next. Every interaction with Luna became a minefield. Her casual touches felt calculated. Her smiles seemed practiced. Her innocent questions about David's cases took on sinister implications. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on my students. Jennifer noticed during our weekly lunch. "Sarah, you look terrible," she said, setting down her fork to study my face. "What's going on?" I wanted to tell her everything, but how could I explain that our miracle daughter might be connected to a man's death without sounding insane? Instead, I mumbled something about work stress and picked at my salad. But Jennifer knew me too well. "This is about Luna, isn't it?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. What if we don't really know her? What if everything she's told us is a lie? "Sarah, what if she's dangerous, Jennifer? What if we've put David at risk, put ourselves at risk, because we were so desperate to believe in this perfect redemption story that we never asked the hard questions?" Jennifer reached across the table to grab my hand. "What did you find?" So I told her. About the phone calls, the photographs, the newspaper articles. About Luna's age discrepancies and the cold case in Tampa. About the way she sometimes watched David with an intensity that I'd mistaken for adoration but now seemed more like study. "You have to tell David," Jennifer said when I finished. "Tell him what?" "That I violated our daughter's privacy by investigating her past. That I'm willing to destroy our family based on circumstantial evidence from 3 years ago. You tell him that something doesn't feel right and you're scared." That evening, David came home from court with Chinese takeout and news that made my stomach drop. "I have a surprise," he announced, setting the bags on the kitchen counter where Luna was already gathering plates. "I've been working on something special for you, Luna." Our daughter turned, her face bright with anticipation. "What kind of surprise?" "You know how you've been talking about wanting to visit art galleries in other cities? Well, I've arranged for us to take a long weekend trip to Tampa. There's a fantastic contemporary art museum there, plus some galleries I think you'd love." The plate in Luna's hand slipped, shattering against the tile floor in an explosion of ceramic shards that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent kitchen. "Tampa?" she whispered, her face gone chalk white. "Luna, are you okay?" David moved toward her, concern etched across his features. "We don't have to go if you don't want to." I just thought, "No." The word came out sharper than intended. Luna immediately forced a smile, crouching to collect the broken pieces. "I mean, that's so sweet of you, Dad, but I have so much work to catch up on and my classes. We could go during your spring break," David suggested, kneeling beside her to help with the cleanup. "It's just a thought. I know how much you love discovering new artists." I watched Luna's face carefully as she gathered the ceramic fragments, noting how her hands trembled, how her breath came in shallow bursts. This wasn't ordinary reluctance. This was fear. "Let me think about it," she said finally, standing with her hands full of broken china. "It sounds wonderful. I just need to check my schedule." But that night, I heard her on the phone again, speaking in rapid Spanish from somewhere in the backyard. And this time, I was determined to understand what was happening. The next morning, while Luna was at class and David was in court, I did something that went against every instinct I had as a mother and wife. I called Detective Maria Santos at the Tampa Police Department, whose name had appeared in several of the newspaper articles. "Detective Santos? My name is Sarah Chen. I'm calling about an old case, the Robert Hartwell investigation from 3 years ago." There was a pause. "Are you a reporter?" "Because I already told your colleagues. We don't comment on ongoing investigations." "Ongoing?" I thought the case was cold. Another pause, longer this time. "Ma'am, who did you say you were?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "Sarah Chen. I'm calling because I think I may have information about Luna Martinez." The silence that followed felt like a lifetime. "Where are you calling from, Mrs. Chen?" "Atlanta. Georgia." "And you know Luna Martinez how?" The truth stuck in my throat. How could I explain that we'd adopted her, that she was living in our home, that my husband, a family court judge, had given her our name and legal protection? She's been staying with us," I said finally. "But some things she's told us don't add up, and I found those old articles, and I just need to know. Mrs. Chen, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Are you alone right now?" The tone of her voice made my knees weak. "Yes. Luna Martinez is not just a person of interest in Robert Hartwell's death. 3 months ago, we got a DNA match from evidence at the scene. She's wanted for questioning in connection with his murder, and there's a warrant out for her arrest. If she's in your home, you could be in danger." The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto my desk beside the folder of printed articles. Luna Martinez, our daughter, our miracle, our legal family member, was wanted for murder. And she was due home from class in 20 minutes. I called David immediately, but it went to voicemail. He was probably in session. I left a message that I hoped sounded calm. "David, please call me as soon as you get this. It's about Luna. It's important." Then I called Detective Santos back and told her everything. The adoption, David's position, our address. She promised to send local officers immediately, but warned me that it might take time to coordinate with Atlanta PD. "In the meantime," she said, "if Luna comes home, act normal. Don't let on that you know anything. We don't know what she's capable of, and we can't risk her running again." I was pacing the kitchen when I heard Luna's Honda pull into the driveway. Forcing myself to sit at the counter with a cup of coffee and a stack of ungraded papers, I tried to look normal as she walked through the door. Hey, Sarah, she called, her voice carrying none of the tension from the night before. How was your day? Good, I managed. Yours? She moved through the kitchen with the easy familiarity of months of shared meals and conversations, pouring herself a glass of water, stealing a cookie from the jar on the counter. Everything about her seemed normal, loving, innocent, except for the way she kept glancing at me, as if trying to read something in my expression. You seem tense, she observed, settling onto the stool across from me. Everything okay? The casual question felt like a test. I forced a smile. Just tired. You know how it is at the end of the semester. She nodded, but those storm gray eyes continued to study my face with uncomfortable intensity. Sarah, can I ask you something? My mouth went dry. Of course. Do you ever regret it? Taking me in, adopting me? Sometimes I worry that I've disrupted your life too much, changed things between you and David in ways you didn't expect. The question was so similar to conversations we'd had before, but now it felt loaded with hidden meaning. Was she asking because she sensed my suspicion, or because she was genuinely concerned about our family dynamics? Never, I said, surprised to find that it was still true, even with everything I now knew. You've been a blessing to us, Luna. She smiled then, the radiant expression that had charmed us from the beginning. But for the first time, I noticed it didn't quite reach her eyes. I love you, Sarah, she said softly. I hope you know that. You and David have given me everything, a home, a family, a future. I would never do anything to hurt that. Before I could respond, we heard David's car in the driveway. Luna's face lit up with genuine joy, and she bounded toward the door like an excited teenager. For a moment, watching her anticipate David's arrival with such obvious pleasure, I almost convinced myself I'd made a terrible mistake. Then David walked in, and Luna threw her arms around him in the enthusiastic hug that had become their daily ritual. But over her shoulder, David's eyes met mine, and I saw something there that made my heart stop. He knew. Somehow, between leaving court and driving home, David had gotten my message and learned the truth. His arms were around Luna in what looked like affection, but his face was gray with shock and something that looked like grief. Luna, he said quietly, his voice steady despite the turmoil I could see in his eyes. We need to talk. She pulled back to look at him, and I watched her face change as she registered his expression. The mask of innocence slipped for just a moment, revealing something harder, more calculating underneath. About what, Dad? She asked, but the endearment sounded different now, less spontaneous, more strategic. About Tampa, David said. About Robert Hartwell. About who you really are. The silence that followed felt like a held breath. Then Luna stepped back from David's embrace, and when she looked at us now, there was no pretense of confusion or hurt. Just a weary acceptance that the game was over. How long have you known? She asked, and her voice was different too, older, sharper, stripped of the grateful sweetness we'd grown used to. Does it matter? David replied. What matters is the truth. All of it. Luna moved to the kitchen window, staring out at the backyard where she'd drawn so many sketches of our life together. When she turned back to face us, her eyes were bright with tears, but her voice was steady. You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I was there when Robert Hartwell died. Yes, I lied about my age, my past, everything. But you want to know the real truth? He deserved what happened to him. The words hung in the air like poison. David took a step forward, his judge's instincts warring with his father's heart. Luna, no, let me finish, she said, holding up her hand. Robert Hartwell wasn't some innocent old man. He was a predator who'd been paying for services from homeless teens for years. My brother Carlos and I were just trying to survive on the streets, and when he offered us money and a place to stay, we thought we were getting lucky. Her voice broke slightly, and for a moment she looked like the vulnerable girl who'd first appeared in our doorway. But there were conditions. Horrible conditions. And when Carlos tried to leave, tried to get us both out of there, Robert threatened to have us arrested for theft, said he'd planted drugs in our bags. Carlos lost it. There was a fight, and Robert fell and hit his head on the coffee table. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and I found myself caught between horror and heartbreak. He was still breathing when we left, she continued. We were scared, stupid kids who panicked. We took what little money we could find and ran. I didn't know he'd died until I saw the news reports weeks later. David's face had gone pale. Where's your brother now? Luna's composure finally cracked, and she sank onto one of the kitchen stools, her whole body shaking. Dead, she whispered. Really dead, not like I told you before. He overdosed 6 months after Tampa. Couldn't handle the guilt, couldn't handle what we'd done. He left me a note saying he was sorry, that he'd tried to protect me but only made everything worse. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of Luna's quiet sobs. I found myself torn between the woman I'd come to love as a daughter and the stranger I was only now beginning to know. So you came here, David said softly. To Atlanta. To start over. Luna nodded. I changed my birthday on fake documents, made myself older so I could claim to be aged out of foster care. I thought if I could just disappear into the system for a few years, maybe the case would go away. Maybe I could build a real life. And then you met us, I said, the pieces finally clicking together. I never meant for it to go this far, Luna said, looking up at us with desperate eyes. I was just trying to survive another day when I met Judge Chen David at the courthouse. When he offered help, I thought maybe for a few weeks I could pretend to have a family. But then you were both so kind, so loving. Her voice trailed off, and she stared down at her hands. I fell in love with being your daughter. I fell in love with having parents who saw me as something more than damaged goods. For the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered to someone. David moved closer, his paternal instincts overriding his shock. You do matter, Luna. That hasn't changed. Hasn't it? She laughed bitterly. I lied to you about everything. I let you adopt me under false pretenses. I made you accessories to harboring a fugitive. How can you look at me and still see your daughter? Before either of us could answer, we heard cars pulling into our driveway, multiple cars, with the unmistakable sound of official vehicles. Through the window, I could see Atlanta Police Department cruisers and an unmarked sedan. Luna saw them too. Her face went ashen, but she didn't run. Instead, she turned to David with an expression of profound sadness. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry for dragging you into this. For lying to you. For making you love someone who doesn't really exist. You do exist, David said firmly, taking her hands in his. The girl who drew pictures of our family, who brought music back into this house, who made us laugh again after years of grief. That girl is real. Whatever else happened, that love was real. The doorbell rang, followed by firm knocking. Luna stood up straight, wiping her eyes and squaring her shoulders with a dignity that broke my heart. I have to go, she said. But I need you to know every moment in this house, every drawing, every family dinner, every time I called you Mom and Dad, that was all me. The real me. The person I could have been if my life had been different. The knocking came again, more insistent. Luna Martinez, a voice called through the door. This is Detective Johnson, Atlanta PD. We need to speak with you. Luna walked toward the front door, then paused and turned back to us one final time. Will you visit me? She asked, her voice small and uncertain. I understand if you can't, if this changes everything. But if you can find it in your hearts to forgive me. I found myself speaking before I'd fully processed the thought. We'll be there. David nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. We'll be there, sweetheart. You're still our daughter. No matter what happens next, you're still our daughter. Luna smiled through her tears, the same radiant expression that had lit up our lives for the past 8 months, and opened the door. I'm Luna Martinez, she said to the officers waiting on our porch. I think you're looking for me. The visitation room at the Fulton County Jail was nothing like the warm, art-filled spaces where our family had learned to know each other. But when Luna walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back severely, she was still unmistakably our daughter. How are you holding up? David asked, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. Better than I expected, she said, and I was relieved to hear genuine calm in her voice. My lawyer thinks we can work out a plea deal. Manslaughter instead of murder, given the circumstances. Maybe 8 to 10 years with good behavior. It wasn't the future any of us had imagined, but it was hope. I've been drawing again, Luna continued, pulling out a small sketch from a folder the guards had allowed her to bring. The art therapy program here is actually pretty good. Look. She slid the drawing across the table, a detailed portrait of David and me sitting in our kitchen, sunlight streaming through the windows, looking happy and peaceful. It was how she remembered us. How she'd seen us during those months when we'd all believed in the miracle of second chances. "It's beautiful, honey," I said and meant it. "I want you to have it," Luna said. "As a thank you. And as a promise." "What kind of promise?" David asked. "That when I get out, I want to be the person you saw in me. The daughter you chose to love. I want to earn that love honestly this time." I felt tears prick my eyes. "You already earned it, Luna. You earned it the first night you slept in our guest room and made our house feel like a home." "No," she said firmly. "I earned your pity, your sympathy, maybe even your affection. But love, real love, requires honesty. And I want to give you that. All of it. The good, the bad, and everything in between." As we prepared to leave, Luna stood and hugged us both, a real hug, full of genuine emotion and free from the careful gratitude that had once felt so practiced. "I love you," she said simply. "Both of you. And I'm going to spend every day of the next 10 years becoming worthy of being your daughter." Walking out of that jail into the Atlanta sunshine, David took my hand. "Are we crazy?" he asked. "For still believing in her?" I thought about the drawings covering our refrigerator, about the sound of laughter that had returned to our house, about the way Luna had brought light back into David's eyes after years of darkness. Maybe, I admitted. But I'd rather be crazy and hopeful than sensible and empty. He squeezed my hand. "So we wait." "We wait," I confirmed. "And we love her. However long it takes. Because sometimes miracles don't come in the packages we expect. Sometimes they arrive broken, frightened, and wrapped in lies so beautiful that we never see the truth until it's too late. But that doesn't make them any less miraculous when they help us find our way back to hope, back to love, back to the possibility that even the most damaged hearts can learn to trust again." Luna Martinez Chen, our daughter, our complicated miracle, had taught us that. And no matter what the future held, that lesson was worth waiting for.